were we back there. At that time, and largely through the efforts of the late Reverend Donald Campbell, who was then the convener of the Dominions and Overseas Committee, the Toronto and Chesley congregations of the Presbyterian Reformed Church united with our church, and services were resumed in Chesley, and the prospects were bright. In Toronto also, the situation was very promising. Now, in 1993, in the year of our centenary, in the mysterious and wonderful providence of the Lord, our witness in Ontario is confined to Chesley, and would in fact be non-existent in Ontario, almost, were it not for the faithfulness of our Chesley friends. Although, for the most part, their antecedents are to be traced back to Holland rather than Scotland, they, in 1989, remained faithful to the Church's witness when others of Scottish extraction followed the lead of the Toronto minister, failed to do so. We are glad that Mr. Gerrit Schuett is with us, for it was he who led the way as far as the Chesley congregation was concerned. After these congregations came under the umbrella of the Church, a succession of deputies went out to Canada, and those of us who visited Ontario will never forget the kind way in which we were received and the hospitality extended to us. It is, I think, right that in this connection the names of the late Mr. and Mrs. James Fraser should be mentioned. We were sorry to hear of Mr. Fraser's recent and sudden passing. We have no services now in Winnipeg, although we hope there are still to be found there those who love the testimony of our church. The same is true of Calgary. In Vancouver, Mr. John A. MacLeod holds the Free Presbyterian fort. Were it not for the stand taken by him and a few others in 1989, the APCs would have extinguished the Free Presbyterian witness there, and neither manse nor church would have remained in our possession. There are at present 4 communicant members and 1 or 2 adherents left in the Vancouver congregation who are Free Presbyterians. But we hope the Lord will yet revive his cause there. After all, there were only 6 people meeting together in Brusfield, Ontario, when George Forrest took up his pen to write that letter, which was to lead to the formation of the transatlantic bond. Vancouver is not without a Free Presbyterian witness as long as John MacLeod and our friends are there. We are sorry that it was not possible for him to be present here today. The transatlantic bond, we said, continues to be strong. There are still those who, even after so many years, would express the same sentiments as George Forrest recorded in his diary. I am very thankful that a kind providence led me to cast in my lot with the Free Presbyterian Church, for it is small and despised by some who ought to know better. Yet they have thus far maintained a scriptural form of worship when larger churches are corrupting it with man's inventions. They would agree with those who sent this declaration to the Synod in 1906, at a time when there was a move for union with the Free Church, and some of our ministers took their departure. Free Presbyterians in Ontario are in full sympathy with the finding of the Synod of the Free Presbyterian Church regarding union with other churches. And I'll not read that excerpt any further since my time is coming to an end. Humbly and thankfully, we are met today to acknowledge the Lord's wonderful kindness in maintaining his own cause in connection with us at home and abroad. Small and despised we may be, but we are still here. Those who prophesied our swift extinction have been proved to be false prophets. As early as 1900, an organ of the press said, secessionism, that's what they called us, in the Highlands is a spent force. At one time, its members were full of activity, gathering to communions and so on. But now it is little heard of, and the expectation is that as the old die out, the younger people will rejoin the Free Church or retired into the established church. The intent of newspaper reporters, Reverend J. S. Sinclair commented, "Who, like the Athenians of old, are constantly in quest of some new thing, may certainly have spent itself in regard to our church, but sometimes the less interest they have in the church, the better. It is not always good carrion such eagles are in search of." The 1843 disruption has received wide coverage, but hardly a mention of the 1893 separation. That we are the disruption-free church is evident to anyone who researches the matter with impartiality. And we are also very, very mindful of that event in our history as we meet here today. The Reverend Donald Beaton, in his own inimitable way, wrote of those who evidently were carried away with the idea that they were called upon to prophesy. And the burden of their prophecy was the extinction of the Free Presbyterian Church. There was no hesitation in their utterances. The Free Presbyterian Church was doomed, and they were the men that said it and must announce it. It is now 100 years. I've changed the number of years from 60, which is what Mr. Beaton wrote, to 100. Since this order of prophets arose, their prophetic utterances came to nothing, and their bodies have long ago turned to dust. It would be a wise thing for prophets of doom to look to other quarters and events. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. MacLeod. Mr. Rayner, please, the Australian and New Zealand witness. 10 minutes. Did you hear that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. You would not be surprised if I told you that there was no Free Presbyterian Church in Australia in 1893. But you may be surprised that interest was shown in the formation of the Free Presbyterian Church in Scotland by people in Australia at that time. The Free Presbyterian Church has not been in Australia for 100 years. But we notice that in the March issue of the 1894 Free Church Quarterly, which was a magazine issued by the Committee of the Free Presbyterian Church of Victoria, these comments were made. The Reverends D. McFarlane Rasay and D. MacDonald Shieldig are being proceeded against with a view to the deprivation of their churches and manses held by them. It is very grievous to find that there are those of their own mind regarding the evils of the Declaratory Act taking part with the Raineyite minority to dispossess them of their properties. They can plead that they faithfully adhere to the principles which the Free Church required of them at their ordination, while those who have occasioned their separation have not. I want you to notice particularly this quote here. They only left the nominal church because it ceased to be what it was when they undertook to serve it. The reigning